Hello there.
What a political move to stick two fingers up at Suella Braverman.
Politics at Jack and Sam's is the podcast where we tell you what's going to happen next week in the wild world of Westminster.
My name is Jack Blanchard of Politico, and with me, as always, is the great Sam Coates of Sky News.
Keeping you ahead of the political agenda.
One top civil servant said to me they're 70-30 in favour of thinking something will happen as soon as Monday.
Sam, is it going to happen, yes or no?
Listen to Politics at Jack and Sam's wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello there. Now, can we start today with this voice note from Heather?
So I had a dream about the ladies from the podcast.
So we wanted people to talk about this podcast, but Heather's gone to the next level.
Suddenly you were descending on an unsuspecting member of the public's house for the weekend. It was all being filmed for TV. And you were basically there to sort of sort them out and fill out forms that they needed, look for education training options, and also do home improvements. And Beth was in charge of the home improvement side and was so focused that she had a headset and a clipboard, and she wouldn't actually look at the camera because she was so busy looking at the jobs that she had to do. So 10 out of 10 for effort there. And yeah, I thought, well, I'd watch that.
What Heather has described is my actual job.
Well, that's...
Not the home improvement part, surely.
I mean, you'd be surprised. I've had people ask me to shift the slabs in their garden and things, and I've changed people's light bulbs and stuff. When you're doing a door knock, people are all like, "I've got this dodgy drain. Can you come in?"
It's raising the possibility for me that maybe Heather's dream could become reality and we could maybe just do a DIY television show.
You know, as a representative of my community, I'm deeply, deeply hurt and offended that in Heather's dream, I'm not the one with the tool belt on that's taking care of business when it comes to knocking up a bit of, flat pack furniture. I can't believe I'm going to say this.
Go and say it.
I once had a dream about Robin Cook. And it was one of them dreams.
About Robin.
Yeah.
I think that what we can say to Heather is that dreams don't always come true.
But we need to get back to reality because this is electoral dysfunction with Beth.
And Jess.
And Ruth.
And we're all in the studio together, which makes it extra fun. Now, please keep sharing us with your mates. And if you've dreamt about this podcast or want to tell us anything else, send us a voice note on WhatsApp. The number is 07934 200 444. And we will have another Answer the Question episode in a couple of weeks, so keep them coming. But today, we're going to be talking about whether the election campaign really started this week and why Jess Phillips is absolutely on top, even if she says so herself, although I just said it, to be fair.
I did not say it.
I said it.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
But first, let's start off with where I've just been. I've hot-footed it back from Essex, where I have been with Sir Keir Starmer, all of the shadow cabinet, a load of activists, a couple of businessmen dropped in, members of the public coming to talk about the NHS, talk about education. It was what I could describe as a full-on general election campaign launch.
Wowzers.
Wowzers, but really? Are we doing it now? Are we starting it now?
Might as well.
To be fair, Beth, you're a political editor. If you've got 6 months of being dragged all over the country to launches and three-sided audiences, it's going to be a heck of a long summer for you. But I think while Kier Starmer was on his way back from Essex today, Rishi Sunak was on Loose Women, the TV show, and went a little bit further on when it was going to be and told people that they can go on their holidays, which I'm assuming means it won't be July. I mean, personally, I think he should stop showing ankle here. Either announce it, don't announce it. Nobody has a right to know when it is. You're the Prime Minister. It's one of the few things you get is to call the election and to appoint a cabinet. But if he just keeps giving away every time he's asked, a little bit here and a little bit there, he's going to get himself boxed in.
So I've got my little card here and it's called Labour's First Steps for Change. I mean, first steps, baby steps, I don't know. I'm not sure about first steps, but anyway. It's like a little pledge card. I've got it in my hand and it's got 6 pledges on it. Deliver economic stability, cut NHS waiting times, launch a border security command, set up Great British Energy, crack down on antisocial behaviour, recruit 6,500 new teachers. So they're the pledges. What was the vibe? He had his sleeves rolled up, no tie. And he was sort of... It was like a Cameron-esque type stump speech where you kind of walk around the stage. He had like some big monitors with prompt lines, but not with a script. The question I asked him was, you set up these missions for government. This is the kind of retail end. It's like a pledge card like Tony Blair did, and I've got his one here as well. It's like the retail offer. So this is what you go onto a doorstep to sell. Jess, how sellable is that? Jess is taking the card.
It's the first time I've seen this card, so thank you for bringing this example for me to look at. I imagine there is currently a box with 700,000 of them on the way to my office. So I think that each and every single one of these things is something that the people in the country want. Almost all of them, in fact, everybody wants. I know that the obvious question is, well, how are you going to do it? What is the detail? And on the back of the card, there seems to be a little bit more detail. The nation will have to wear glasses because it's quite hard for me to read, and I am.
The arm. Put the arm forward.
I'm going to do the arm. Yeah, it's funny because actually the kind of thing that is easy to sell on a doorstep is something that somebody is directly going to get. So. Childcare is a really good example that if you have a childcare pledge, then you can say, oh, it will be different after the election because you will get 30 hours extra. And people have a tangible association of that in their own lives. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of like what's in it for me.
Right, he announced 5 missions over a year ago. The missions for the country, it was like get economic growth to the highest level of the G7. That's the kind of top industrialised nations in the world by the end of 2030 or during the next parliament. There was clean power, so that was to make all electricity come from renewables by 2030. Like they were big ambitions, clear targets, not on the card. But so I went to look at Blair's. You know what you're saying about selling on a doorstep, Ruth? I want to come to you because when I look at Blair's from 97, cut class sizes to 30 or under for 5, 6 or 7-year-olds. You know what you're getting there. No rise in income taxes. It's weird that because they could have put that on a pledge card, right? Labour have already said they're not going to lift income tax, yeah? Anyway, they didn't. And then you've got cut NHS waiting list by treating an extra 100,000 patients. So they were like proper tangibles. Ruth, there's a cynical or a sort of sceptical view, which is you can lower the bar. You don't have to make big promises because you're kind of sailing into victory anyway. Or is it partly, I don't want to overpromise or promise stuff I can't deliver?
There's a school of thought which says that the perfect manifesto for any political party is one where you open it up and it says nothing inside
100%.
because it gives you it gives your opponents no targets to aim at, and it gives you full scope when you actually get into power to do something. But that doesn't get you over the line in an election. You've got to have a retail offer. In terms of this, I think one of the problems in terms of these baby steps cards or whatever it's called, I think part of the problem that he's got, leaving aside my gripe that 3 out of the 6 are devolved, so don't apply to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, but it is one of the sort of attacks that the Tories are trying to land on Keir Starmer is that he doesn't stand for anything and that he's a flip-flopper. And if you look at the sort of pledges that he put out when he was running for the leadership of the Labour Party, pledge 1 on his leadership card was all about economics, and it is, the contrast to what's on that card today is pretty high. The third, pretty much on today's, completely contradicts the 6th one that was on his leadership one, and then the 5th one.
What was the?
So the 3rd one is on launching Border Security Command, and the 6th one was about defending migrants' rights. So what are you saying to people? Make me leader. I'm going to defend migrants' rights, and they're being ostracised and criminalised and all the rest of it. And I'm going to, be their absolute defender. And now he's doing practically the Edstone on immigration and putting out mugs with it on, which is what the left of the party will see it as a betrayal. But I mean, is it a bad thing to talk left if you've got a party that was cool with Jeremy Corbyn being your leader and you want to be next, and then talking centre or centre left, centre right to the country, which is where it is?
Well, that's what it's doing.
Or do you have to somehow have a few more breadcrumbs to show how you got from way over here to kind of where you are now?
So we had like 6 minutes, get 6 minutes afterwards. So I don't know. I mean, we can barely get through hellos in 6 minutes, can we?
Not even close.
I've got to somehow scrutinise the entire future Labour government should they win the election. The whole thing, Ruth, that you just said about trustworthiness, that was the whole theme of my interview with him, on the basis of pulling up all of the things you just talked about, which were these pledges he made to be Labour leader.
The one thing I've absolutely clear in my own mind is I'm not going to make a promise before an election which I don't think I can deliver after election. I think the public in the last 14 years have had far too much of people who say before an election they'll deliver everything and afterwards they don't. We have to break that pattern.
Are you trustworthy?
Yes, I have set out the missions. I've thought through the missions which are about changing the future of our country, whether it's the health service, whether that's energy, whether that's crucially the economy, antisocial behaviour, the skills that our young people need. And now I back that up
so
with these first steps.
You say you're trustworthy. The reason I ask is you've junked pretty much every pledge you were elected Labour leader on. I've got the list. Increase income tax for the top 5%, abolish universal credit, public ownership, not just for rail, defend freedom of movement as we leave the EU, a Prevention of Military Intervention Act, support abolition of tuition fees.
If you've got it in front of you, Beth, you'll know that for each of the 10 pledges, there's about 2 or 3 sitting under them. That's about 30 commitments, of which a few have been adjusted. The vast majority are in place. But I accept that some of them have been adjusted. Let me tell you why.
Adjusted? They've been dumped.
Let me just explain why.
It matters because this is about trust.
Let me explain why. Since that those pledges were made, we've had huge damage done to our economy. So some of the things that I think we should have done, we could have done, we can't afford to do anymore. Good leaders know you have to adapt and change with it.
His argument was, when the facts change, a good leader changes position. I sort of said to him, wasn't it actually because you wanted to win? And how can the public now trust? Now you did what you needed to do to become Labour leader. You dropped all those pledges. So you make these promises now and then you get to become Prime Minister should they vote for you. And then do you change again? And I suggested to him it was that he might have a trust problem because of this with voters. Didn't much like that line of questioning, but, you know, I think it's a legitimate question to ask. And I think the Tories also, it's what they're going to try and weaponise, if you like, in election. Jess?
I mean, to the last point that you said, it doesn't matter if the Tories say that about Kier Starmer because no bugger trusts them. And in a way, that's probably been factored in. And I think to what both you and Ruth have said, that the breadcrumbs issue of how you get there. So Tony Blair, I mean, having the comparison with the Tony Blair pledge card, is the idea, the famous being tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime, is that actually I can make Kier Starmer's pledge in his leadership and the one that is on this card the same, because our border security does matter, but so do migrants' rights. And you can have both things. I don't have to pick one or the other. And some people in the left of the Labour Party would tell me that I absolutely have to pick, and some people on the right of the Conservative Party tell me I absolutely have to pick. But I live in the actual world. I think it's something that will be waged at Kier Starmer. I think that the defence that he is putting up, that when the facts change, the situation changes, is absolutely a totally reasonable thing to say. But you can only say it so many times. And it's absolutely fine if things change. I change my mind all the time. I've changed my mind on various different policies. But you can get away with that if you are really signalling who you are. And so I think that is the bit that's missing.
I think the problem that both actually Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer have is people know bits about their hinterland, but nobody knows why they chose to leave their really successful careers to go into politics. Like, I don't know why Rishi Sunak chose to leave what it was that he did before in business and all that sort of stuff to come in to the House of Commons. I don't know why a former Director of Public Prosecution decided to stop following the law and going into Parliament. Now, both of them easily could tell a story about why they did it, what their burning mission is. Tell us a bit, like, show us a bit of who you are and what you care about and what you want to change. And if Rishi Sunak wants to make, you know, the country a dynamic economy, which means that everybody feels better and richer and has more control over their lives, they have more economic independence, you know, tell me that. That's authentic. I can believe that. I can believe that you wanted to do that. You wanted to make, you know, the government run more like a company, to be dynamic, to be fleet-footed, all of that sort of thing. If you're Keir Starmer, tell me that actually, you know, you were working within the constraints of the law and, you know, you saw how people got screwed by the system and you want to change the system and you want to make the laws work better for the small guy and you want to make sure that the justice system works, because at its absolute heart, you cannot have fairness in this country if you do not have justice in this country. I would believe that. Neither of them can do it. Neither of them can tell their own story and tell people why, not just why they should vote for their parties, but why they should vote for them.
I do think, I'm going to stick my neck on the line a bit here, Jess, and you might disagree with me, but I do think there is a Starmer issue here going into a general election. I think within himself, he knows that he said stuff that he needed to say, that he sat in Jeremy Corbyn's cabinet and called for a second referendum, did all these things, probably for political calculation. He sees himself as a principled man. I think he carries both these things, right?
Yeah.
So he did things that he needed to do in 2016 to 17 to 19 to become the Labour leader. And he knows probably that he did it. And he's made promises to win, knowing that he had to appeal to the left. And that wasn't necessarily what he actually wanted to do or needed to do to win power. And somehow in this election, he's got to reconcile those two things, because actually what he and I ended up in today was a bit of a scratchy interview about it. But he's got to find a way to answer these questions. Is that fair, Jess?
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it is fair, and there won't be a single politician in the world who hasn't played to the audience in front of them. Two examples I can think of people who've led the Conservative Party where I felt that it was not because of principle, it was just opportunism for themselves. So Liz Truss, literally a paper bag in the wind. I mean, she was like against the monarchy and a Liberal Democrat, and then she was a Cameroon, then she was like, a Remainer, and then she was basically, I don't know, Bannon's sidekick. But Boris Johnson as well, you know, your classic 2 articles about Remain and Leave, and he decided which one was best for him. I don't put Keir Starmer in that same category. I don't think it's opportunism just for him. I do think that it is political calculation along the way for a thing that he very principally, he thought the Labour Party had to be taken over. And he, in my view, I don't know, he's never said this to me, but he looked at the Labour Party and he said, this is going to need to change if the Labour Party wants to take power.
Doesn't he just own that and say it rather than squirm around over it?
I think the problem here for him is that because he doesn't have that overriding story, that overriding mission, where he can then assimilate the changes into the direction of travel so people understand it. And we don't know what Keir Starmer's overriding vision is, and we don't know actually what Rishi Sunak's is either.
You know, though, after we recorded the pod last week, he then did a big Dover speech, which we didn't talk about, right, because it happened after. But this was all about the migration announcement and the border force. And the border force is now, he had 5 missions and it's now been added in because obviously they know illegal migration is going to be a big thing in the election. Anyway, so we go down and he's got Natalie Elphicke. Jess, I know that you have been deeply uncomfortable with this defection of Natalie Elphicke. We've talked about it in the pod. And I said to him in this interview, are you ruthless? And he said yes. He wasn't ruthless for the Labour Party. He was ruthless for the country. So Starmer was, you know, he's going to do what it takes to win for the country.
I believe that of him, actually. It's like I say, the difference between him and Boris Johnson was ruthless for himself. I think Keir Starmer is genuinely ruthless for the Labour Party and to get rid of the Tories. Whether that's enough, and actually that's better than nothing.
And that's where tribalism comes into politics. So somebody who, like me, who was deeply uncomfortable and has spoken out many times against Boris Johnson's premiership, I was skipping into the voting booth because whatever his character deficiencies were, and I do not believe he was of the right character to hold the highest office in the land, it was him or Jeremy Corbyn. And therefore, anything was better than somebody who would line up with our enemies in a time when the world is in a really, really difficult and complicated state. So actually, people cast their votes for lots of different reasons. They cast it for people, but they also cast it against others. And I think the other thing that was really notable in Keir Starmer's address today in front of the audience was just how much he, every speaker, every riff, every scripted line, every unscripted line mentioned the word change. He's saying this is going to be a change election. So he is absolutely betting the house. He feels like he doesn't need to put 6,500 knew this or 20,000 knew that, or we're going to spend 30 billion doing this. He feels he doesn't need to because he's made the calculation. This is a change election. And if I say change often enough, I'm going to win. And he, honestly, where the polls are, where the people are, where the sense of the country is, he's probably right.
The final thing I said to him though in the interview was, it sort of went his way, not mine, because I said, so you're ruthless and you're trustworthy, because I asked him and he just went, thank you very much. And I was like, I wasn't asserting that.
He walked into
and
that
I was
one.
like, bloody hell, you might be tired, mate, but you got me there. Anyway, so
quite funny.
I quite liked it as well. I was like, all right, fair enough. We'll come back to this another time, Mr. Starmer. I think he's got a bit of ground to make up with the electorate after things he said in the past.
I think the lack of ambition might come and bite him a little bit, because I thought the first thing that jarred with me was deliver economic stability. It's point one on this card. And for him to win, he needs people that have previously voted Conservative to vote Labour. And that does seem to lowball things a bit. I think people are looking for, they don't just want it to be stable, because stable means the same. Stable means what we have now. People are feeling that it's quite difficult. They want it to be better. They want something that says, economically, I'm going to have more money in my pocket. I don't know what the word should have been, but whether it was economic success or economic renewal or economic, like something that had a bit of the hopey changey stuff. Because at the moment, stability just sounds a bit like, we're just going to flatline for a bit longer, lads.
I said this to one of his aides afterwards. I said, a government promising economic stability is like me as a mother promising to feed my children, like it's a basic job. And then they said, yes, but after Liz Truss, da-da-da-da-da. And I suppose their argument would be the sort of chaos, as they would put it, of the Tories means that they can dial it back. That was my Kier Starmer day. There was more this week, because earlier in the week, it was Rishi Sunak's turn. He did a press conference on Monday. It was at Policy Exchange, which is a think tank. And it was sort of in an airless room, so it did not have the rally feel of the Starmer election launch. He basically said that the country would be less safe under a Labour government. He talked about the axis of authoritarian states, which, we've talked about when I went on that trip. It was basically another version of the speech he did when he did that trip to Poland with the NATO chief and then to Berlin. And he's kind of doing it for a domestic audience. Ruth, did you watch the speech and what did you think of it?
My problem with it is the same problem that I had with his community relations speech that he did in the steps of Downing Street, the same problem I had with the speech that he did on immigration about a month ago, is that he's doing these big set-piece speeches. Somebody in Number 10's obviously decided, we need you to look prime ministerial, we need you to leverage the office that you hold. But then they do nothing with it. Yeah. So he does a big set-piece speech and then nothing happens. So there's no comms grid that comes off the back where they have like mini announcements that come off it that reinforce it. And the big thing about politics is you have to say something 30 times before your voter hears it for the first time.
Can I jump in here? Because you have really hit on something that I've been thinking about when I compare the two parties and actually what Starmer's team's been talking about. Because when I say there's nothing new in your pledges, they're like, no, because we have to keep telling the public again and again and again and again and again what we're going to do. And it is interesting, the message discipline in the Conservative Party at the moment, Ruth. I remember the Linton Crosby years. He was the election guru.
Get barnacles off the boat.
Which has literally become my little slogan to my own self when I'm like dissembling and all over the place. I'm like, Beth, take the barnacles off your boat. Focus.
Which was about not having anything extraneous that took away from the message. But his other phrase that he always used, which is actually more apropos in this position, is that you can't fatten a pig on the way to market. So actually, you cannot, in the last week of a campaign, introduce something. You've got to have laid it out 12 months before, 6 months before, 2 months before, 1 month before. Yeah.
So where you can see the Sunak team doing this is all of the turning the corner, delivering on the plan. Can you think of any other straplines, Ruth, that they're using?
Like the plan is working. Don't try and derail the plan is obviously something that they've picked upon and they're going to do it. And they had a couple of false starts before they got to that. I mean, whether it's going to work or not, whether people think that the plan is working, I think there's an assumption there that you've got to work with. I think they're rudderless. I think they really don't know what they're doing. They're trying to put stuff out there to see what sticks. They're throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. I don't actually think that talking about defence this week was a particularly bad thing to do. The world feels pretty unstable at the moment. People want reassured. They want to know that defence is strong. I don't think that it shifts votes at a general election. I also think that there is something factored in. It is the first responsibility of government, of any government, to keep your citizens safe. So this is like, you kind of expect the government to do that anyway. And Starmer's not Corbyn. You do not think that he is a risk to national security. So again, I don't think it's a vote winner, but I don't actually think it was a stupid set-piece event.
What's interesting about the playbook, if you like, that they are rolling out is this whole thing is they are trying to talk about the country being less safe. My colleague Chris Mason at the BBC, his question to the PM was, is the country less safe under Kier Starmer? And the PM just turned around and said, yes, that's the argument they're trying to make and the sort of attack line, if you like.
I don't think anybody cares what Rishi Sunak said. I don't even know what he said. The only takeaway was I thought he sounded a bit like he had hay fever. That was what stuck out to me. Nobody in the country knows what Rishi Sunak said the other day. And actually, when you and Ruth were just going over, like, oh, what were the slogans? I hadn't ever heard of them. And, I'm quite engaged. I cannot critique his speech enough to say, I literally haven't got a clue what he said.
What I asked him at the press conference was to comment on his remarks that he made in a Times interview where he said the local elections suggested we are heading for a hung parliament with Labour as the largest party. He's also ruled out doing a deal with any other parties should the Conservatives become the biggest party at a general election but not have an outright majority. I think that's partly because there's no one that will do a deal with them after Lib Dem years, followed by the falling out with the DUP. But anyway, so I asked him, you've suggested there's a hung parliament, you've ruled out doing any other deal with another party, so why are you appearing to acknowledge that you're unlikely to remain Prime Minister, in the same breath as you're doing a speech as to why you should? And this is what he said.
Sorry, Beth, I'm not entirely sure I understood the question, but what I would say is that wasn't me who said those things. That was independent election analysts who made those points about the results of the local elections. My point is we've had the local elections now. The next election that our country's going to face is the general election. And the choice of that general election is clear. As I said, it's about the future versus the past.
I don't like that he said that to you, because I think that he basically was trying to assert after the local elections, and it's spin and everybody does it, let's be honest. He was trying to assert that basically, you can't have a coalition of chaos and that's what you might end up with. And so he was really, really leaning on the idea of a hung parliament. But you are right, in my view, Beth, that to assert that as the Prime Minister is to suggest that you're not going to be the Prime Minister. That is a rare moment of honesty, actually, for Rishi Sunak. I'm not saying he's a dishonest man generally, but it's a rare moment of honesty in politics that somebody would admit that. And then to try and sort of sidestep it, I think was a bit gaslighty, if I'm honest.
I mean, from my perspective, it was like, I just thought it was a reasonable question. And then he sort of pretended that I'd asked this really stupid. But the point is that politically, Ruth, what do you think about the idea of a Prime Minister after doing that badly in locals, sort of suggesting there's going to be a hung parliament? Is that politically naive? Like, don't you always go into election, doesn't matter how far you are behind, saying I can win? Is that not the message?
Yeah, so I took this a little bit differently. I think both Kier Starmer and Rishi Sunak have a tendency, if they've not got something that they want to front foot on, then they go back to something that's happened before and they borrow. So his stuff talking about the axis of whatever was pretty close to George W. Bush axis of evil. Like, he's done quite a lot of Cameron-y stuff. A lot of what Starmer's doing now, there's echoes of Blair in it. On the run-up to 97, we've talked about the pledge card. And I think what he was trying to do was a very Cameron on the run-up to the 2015 election, which is your choices either are you can have, the continuation of a Conservative government, or you can have a coalition and when he's talking about independent analysts, I'm assuming he's talking about Michael Thrasher, who was Sky's kind of analyst as well as a psephologist in his own right, who came out and said that if the local elections were transferred to a general election, if those results were transferred over, it would be a hung parliament. Now, I think it is in Rishi Sunak's interest to say to people that this election isn't a done deal. I also think it's actually in Kier Starmer's interest to say that this isn't a done deal, because he wants to turn his vote out. He doesn't want anyone to think that there's no point going to the polls because it's already been decided.
He could have said to me, yeah, I didn't mean it like that, but he sort of went, I didn't say that, Michael. And I'm like, no, but you took the Michael Thrasher analysis and then you transposed it into your own work. That's all. And then what happens is, actually in that moment, the mic is taken away from you, so you have no right of reply. Anyway, you have to suck it up. That's part of my job.
But from the other side, and I've been on the other side where you've got a press conference, you go to each of the broadcasters and then you pick out the political editors of the papers and all the rest of it. And if they're referring to a quote that you made a fortnight ago, you might not remember it. You do a lot of this. So I actually don't think that it's actually also not really his nature, and I will defend him in that. And I think that his point that he was trying to make was very much going, I don't really get this question.
Yeah.
What have I got in my locker? Right, I'll come back to the camera.
Yes.
It's either us or a coalition of chaos.
I don't think it's a male-female thing, but I do think that he gets irritated with questions that he thinks are stupid, because I've seen him do it.
Yeah, no, I do. I think his irritation, tetchiness, does not serve him well.
No.
I think he's much better on the front foot than he is at playing defence. I think, he loved being everybody's favourite cuddly chancellor that was handing out free money. I think he finds the politics of politics quite hard.
These two, I've never seen them so excited as talking about campaigns.
Love it.
They're all jumping
Love
in
it.
their seats and rubbing their hand. Oh my God.
Love a campaign.
They're such political nerds. I love it. Let's have a break. We're back in a minute to answer some of your questions, but also find out why Jess thinks she's on top. Welcome back. And Jess, are you feeling on top?
I mean, I'm quite tired, but yeah, I suppose the idea is that I had a political win this weekend. It isn't just me. It was me and Wendy Chamberlain from the Liberal Democrats. Normally, I spend my entire life fighting against them in my own seat, but we can reach across the aisle. Me and Wendy Chamberlain laid an amendment to the government's proposals about how we deal with perpetrators of violence and sexual violence who are members of Parliament. And Penny Mordaunt wanted it to be that if a member of Parliament was charged with a crime by police, that they would be excluded from Westminster, which is a massive shift and change from where she was over the last 2 years and where everybody else seemed to be on it. It was on arrest that she had originally proposed, which we were all fine with. So we sought to amend it and we won the vote by one.
By one.
What I absolutely love in people trying to identify who is the one is that obviously we're all the one, and I haven't really appreciated people sort of dining out of being the one on the backs of the labour of a group of women.
This was quite a fascinating night in the Commons, because the expectation was that this amendment that Jess Chamberlain and others laid was not going to pass, that actually you get kicked off the estate, or you're not allowed to come to the estate, the parliamentary estate, if you have been charged with a sexual or violent offence. Now, you got it changed so at point of arrest, you cannot come back onto the estate by one vote. I have to say, Jess, the next morning, there were loads of quite unhappy messages in my inbox from Conservative MPs that had not wanted this to go through, and we can go into why.
I probably would have voted for it anyway, but where I would have been troubled is this idea about voting for it on arrest and not charge. If we were all believing that a parliament was a place where we would all act in the most upright way and we wouldn't try and weaponise an arrest, and that people would always have the presumption of the same due process as any other member of the United Kingdom, and we have rules about anonymity in stuff, that would give me more confidence. But I do think that there are genuine concerns which aren't just misogynistic, hatey women standing up for rapist concerns in this. So I think I probably would have voted for you and that amendment, because in terms of being able to tell people in Parliament that their safety is important, and that we understand that it's important, and that and that we think that you deserve to have protection and further protection than you've had, I think that would have won the day with me, but I wouldn't have done it without concern.
This was not a party political issue in that sense, right? Absolutely not. I mean, it was an amendment crossbench anyway. But this is Bob Seeley, a Conservative MP. He said, to be honest, he tweeted this, I avoid self-obsessed debates as it looks awful. But in fact, all MPs who voted for this, what they have done is undermine the principle of innocent until proven guilty. And a lot of people were uncomfortable about that, right?
Well, to come back on it, so a number of different points. I agree with people obsessing about Westminster is painful and boring, blah, blah, blah. I totally agree with that. However, the thing that gets me across the line is that we should be expected to be treated like everybody is treated outside of the building. And I wouldn't want somebody who had been arrested for sexual crimes teaching my kids, being a social worker, being a police officer. A little bit one rule for us, one rule for the rest. So does it, if a teacher is suspended on full pay, does that affect innocent until proven guilty? Or is it just a perfectly reasonable safeguard that you should expect in any work?
So
at the moment, the situation as it is at the moment is they're on arrest. In fact, before arrest, people are being asked to stay off the estate. There are members of Parliament who haven't been on the estate, who've never been arrested, because there's some sort of gentleman's agreement. So the point of arrest is at least that there has been some. You can't... and the vexatious argument.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you.
Oh, God, what a
so
load
I'm glad you brought it up, because you look so cross. I don't think I would have been able to ask you now. Some of your Conservative colleagues have said that to me about the... No, explain it.
Okay, they are concerned that this is true. We get vexatious complaints about us all the time as members of Parliament. And actually, to be fair, quite a lot of teachers, social workers, police officers suffer the same. We get vexatious complaints, and they are acting like that on the basis of every vexatious complaint there is an arrest. I've had loads of people report me to the police. Loads of people over the years, vexatiously. When I said that I wouldn't stab Jeremy Corbyn in the back, I'd stab him in the front. Metaphorically, I was obviously referring to quite a few people called the police on me. Do you know what the police didn't do? Arrest me. But the only time the police have actually investigated me, ever, and they did a thorough investigation with CID, I was accused of treating the electorate because I tweeted that I had given out food bank vouchers on the day of the 2019 election, and the local Conservative Party activists reported me to the police. And the police did a thorough investigation. And you know what didn't happen? I wasn't arrested. So the point of arrest, the idea that if you make a vexatious complaint, that the police immediately, get the handcuffs out, is just for the birds. I sometimes wish that was the case in cases of sexual violence. It's so far from the truth. This will only apply in crimes that are sexual crimes or serious violence.
Yeah, I've been interviewed by police because the SNP were moaning about something that I'd said on a TV programme and all that sort of stuff. It does happen all the time. That is why that's not an argument that I've used, because the police are a bit more sensible than
better than that.
It was a moment, Jess, wasn't it? Because often in Parliament, you've talked about it yourself, you go through the voting lobbies, you do what you're told, you don't really care about much. And this, for you and the colleagues of yours that battled for this was a surprise win in a way, right?
I was in the lobby with Angela Eagle, and she's been there of old, so I sort of trust her in that sort of the people who understand the room and the votes. And she was like, "You've not won it." So, I didn't even go in for the reading of the result because I just thought, I've made my point. I've tried to extend the argument.
And then,
when I'd won...
What was your tweet? I loved it.
I was just went, shit, we won by one. I was genuinely surprised.
I liked the fact that Theresa May was one of the people that were part of your...
Loved it.
That was part of your 171 or however many you had.
She was the one. Do you know, I'm going to let her be the one.
Well, I'm glad of that, because both in her time at the Home Office and her time as Prime Minister, her brilliant time post being Prime Minister, what a great ex-Prime Minister she is, and it's a skill. She is very quiet, she's very reserved, but she is a fucking ally.
I would really like, and I'm going to put this on Ruth, I would love her to come on this podcast.
What I will say to try and entice her was that not only do I think that she can be the one, she was also the best dressed in that voting lobby.
Oh,
lovely neon jacket.
Every time. We're going to get her on. I really would like you to come on, Theresa May, please. Anyway, look, we've had an email before we do. I love this, from Greg and Greg. The email's electoraldysfunction@sky.uk. Now, they say, we're going back in time to a happy time last weekend. We're a British-Swiss couple. Can you see where I'm going here? Oh, Jess's little eyes lit up. We were very pleased to hear that Jess and her son were supporting Switzerland in the Eurovision last Saturday. Is she always this good at picking the winner? But more importantly, which Swiss food did you decide on? Was it a fondue, a raclette, or rosti? Come on, let's have it.
Right, so the answer is we had some reblochon cheese, which is Swiss cheese. I did want to get we've got a raclette maker, but again, I was actually quite drunk by the time I started watching Eurovision, and doing raclette in the kitchen seemed like a big effort. I just want to say, on this podcast, Ruth has successfully predicted people who are going to have to resign. And so far, I have successfully picked the winner of Eurovision, and that seems to be like going to be the standard here.
Yeah, I'm an angel of death. She is who you want in your corner. I mean, that's how it's breaking down here.
Right, what are we up to this weekend, Ruth?
We're having a very, very large 43rd birthday party for no other reason than we just want a frigging party.
Oh, I love that.
So I'm party planning.
Party planner.
This weekend I will be celebrating the 19th birthday of my son.
I
won't probably be celebrating it with him because he's got better people to hang out with. And my bearded irises that I've planted are looking amazing, so I'm going to have to get people over for a drink on Sunday just so that they're there for the moment that they're fleetingly out.
So Beth, go on, which theatre are you going to this week?
Literally, talking about posh. I am going to Glyndebourne.
Ooh!
To the opera.
My mum and dad once went to Glyndebourne and Margaret Thatcher was on the next table.
Yeah, it's so posh. We got to wrap it, ladies, but remember, all of you out there, you can WhatsApp voice note us on 07934 200 444 or send us an email at electoraldysfunction@sky.uk. From the party planners to the party goers to the opera lady. Hope you all have a lovely weekend. Bye.
Bye.